What does it take to integrate web content management systems and e-commerce platforms? Luck? Crazy glue? A barrel of monkeys? Let's find out. Welcome to Web Currents, a video series from Adobe where we explore the latest trends and insights in web development. I'm Ron Nagy, and as luck would have it, today we're diving into the integration of content management systems and e-commerce platforms. In this episode, we're going to cover how these two areas come together in harmony. On the show today, we have Cedric Huesler, Senior Director of Product Management for AEM, and Tyler Kraft, Director of Engineering for one of our esteemed partners, Blue Acorn. We'll cover a quick overview to set the stage and then move on to topics like the shift from simple commerce interfaces to storytelling and immersive digital engagements. Then we'll get into the developer mindset amidst these changes and tools like API mesh and microservices needed to meet these challenges. Lastly, we'll touch on agile development, customer collaboration, core web vitals, SEO, MarTech, and strategies for simplifying complex CMS and commerce integrations. It's going to be an insightful discussion loaded with expert insights. Let's go. Cedric, what are you thinking about in terms of the state of CMS commerce integration today? Is it like it was a couple of years ago? Has anything changed recently?
Well, without being the history uncle here, I think certainly things have changed significantly. And since then, it's clear this needs to be one unified experience for the end user. You don't think of this as two different technologies. And I think that's certainly the big shift is really decoupled experience where the front end brings it all together and allows brands to design various shoppable experiences as they see fit.
That's great. Tyler, are you seeing similar things when you are out in the field working with customers?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of the same things, but I think what's been coming up a lot more frequently is we're not just creating an interface for a buy button or an add to cart button. We're trying to sell stories. We're trying to allow and create digital experiences to sell a story about that product and not just sell a product based on specs anymore.
So when you're creating these stories, when you're creating these surfaces in order to tell these stories, are there new interfaces that you're enabling to do that? What's changed there?
What we're seeing is a shift in finding the right tools for the right jobs and understanding that we want to be able to find a tool that can share that story in a number of different areas. Being able to separate content and commerce and being able to take that content and reuse that in multiple different omni-channel experiences, right? How do we pull some of that digital content that we're creating on the site into an in-store experience? Even if it's a digital in-store experience, how can we find a tool or a platform that allows us to support both of those experiences?
Right on. That's great. So, given that as the backdrop, how should developers be thinking about bringing commerce to web experiences or bringing their skills to bear against these challenges?
There's two parts here that I feel like is important. One thing is this idea of you build components or building blocks in whichever stack you pick and choose that are then reusable as the stories being weaved in different ways, also depending on channel. And that rich content being in as many places as possible helps significantly to reduce advertising costs using that content in organic ways versus having to just relying on the fact that you just buy yourself all traffic with advertising. But back to the developer's point of view, again, I think the composability is key. And the second point I wanted to make when it comes to developers, make sure when you build shoppable experiences that yes, you focus on the consumer, the conversion counts, everything else is like, sure, nice. But giving merchandisers the experience that they can drive or do their job basically. And that self-service is possible.
That's great. Tyler, for developers, what's the mindset shift that they are probably experiencing right now with this?
I would agree with a lot of what Cedric said, and in that it may not always look like it's long-term job security when you create a content solution where they don't actually have to leverage development support to author content for that page. But I think goal number one is, can we create a solution where the authors of these pages don't require a bunch of extra support from a development staff to help them tell the stories? Because all it's going to do is then allow them to contact us again for the next big things, right? We
Yeah.
can shift our focus towards what can we do to continue growth, continue that evolution to build you a better platform to tell even more stories and more creative stories instead of, hey, we need some updates on this page.
Building systems that are self-service, that are resilient, that allow teams to take it and run with it, to get whatever content they need to get up published. In the past, it was multi-year journeys. Has that changed recently where Customers are looking to be more agile and do smaller pieces of the project, or are they still engaging in large projects?
We're seeing a little bit of both. There's those greater digital transformations that still occur where we're moving from one platform to another platform. That's a long-term position that we need to get to an end solution to where we can then set up for more iterative development going beyond that. But we're also still seeing the alternative in that we want to see results faster. We want to at least try things. We want to test. We want to put out some proof of concepts to see, is this a viable option for us at a greater scale? Let's do some smaller, iterative, more agile like tests, whether it's, hey, let's build a single page with this solution. Let's try to create a solution to help tell a story or sell a product. Let's test what that looks like first at a smaller scale, get some data from that, see if it's a viable long-term option, and then build it out with that more long-term goals in mind.
That sounds really familiar to the transformation that our team has been through working with customers while we're building the product. I don't know, Cedric, you want to talk a little bit about how we've been approaching those kinds of interactions?
You bring up a good point. I think at a product company, we've been doing enterprise software for, a good 20 years now. You collect your requirements, talk to customers, build something, give them an alpha beta version, and then somehow see if whatever you came up with fits. And in most cases that was successful. You made a product that had a good impact in the industry. Now we actually changed that. We are co-developing the product. The difference is that we are basically committing to selected customers, say, hey, this is the functionality that we see you want. We don't have it yet, but we want to build it. So we're actually building the feature as we're also helping to implement the project or supporting implementing the project, very close ties with our partners in order to make sure that at the end, this customer is successful. For us, in order for a feature to become generally available, we want 5 customers to see value from that. And that's not just like beta, quickly test a little bit and tell me you like it, but really in production use. It's a massive change for the way engineering is organized, massive change to the way product management works, but it has been very rewarding because we are seeing the real and sometimes messy reality when it comes to implementing things, and you're more exposed to the real world. It takes longer, but we feel like that's worth it because we're building ultimately a better product. So we did this for commerce and content specifically because it's just a challenging area to figure out how to best build that.
And from an SI perspective too, we've seen a lot of success in that model ourselves, especially through the VIP program you mentioned. We've a number of times implemented small iterative proof of concepts to say, hey, let's test this out. Let's get some data from it. We've even taken some of these proof of concepts, published them live, made them live so we can get real data from them. So we can start to understand what's the benefits of this, what's the impacts behind this, and being able to then take that and then expand upon that through future roadmap items.
I think we probably agree on the complexity. They're messy, they're complex by their very nature. There's a lot of moving parts. How do you think about complexity and how you deliver these CMS commerce integrations? And have there been ways or strategies that you've used to simplify the approach? Tyler, you mentioned testing in smaller areas to make sure that you can prove out what you believe to be true. Are there other ideas that developers would find valuable in approaching these projects?
Running storefront at peak effectiveness. And with that, I mean, really from performance to organic traffic acquisition, obviously running advertising or smart bidding. And of course, what's happened on site, then drop off bounce rates on the first page view. No. It is hard. And it is interesting because in the past, we're like, hey, here's the software, go build your storefront. Good luck. And now in the VIP projects, we're just like in the middle of it. And we're like, whoa, this is really hard. So I think definitely for us, we're looking at this much more holistic as a sense of where we think we can help. Lots of complexity has been added by customers having to cobble different systems together. So we are trying to figure out how can we as a vendor make this much, much more simpler, like architecturally simpler. And certainly as of the do, Adobe has acquired a commerce vendor. We didn't have a commerce vendor for many years, so we were just integrating with others. So we want to really deliver a package that is then very Again, simple, but nicely put together. So it delivers on all these key things that are important for being a successful storefront.
Tyler, anything to add there?
I've been with Adobe Commerce for over 11 years now. And I think one of the things that we've seen is, yes, we can build out all these customizations and extensions and modules within the application, but all that's doing is adding extra time when we need to deal with upgrades, whether it's security patches or next major version upgrades that we have to support. So we're starting to now understand that there's better ways to take these customizations, abstract them out of the core application, and keep that as native as we can to allow to facilitate those upgrades a lot faster. Especially when it comes to security patches, we need to react and respond to those a lot faster than we can if we have 100 different customized modules that extend core functionality, right? So taking that and creating microservices on top of the application to handle and offboard a lot of that extensibility, right? And then the introduction of API meshes and being able to take data from different systems, especially when we're talking about headless content system, being able to take data from different sources and still feed into a unified structure for that dedicated content engine that we're dealing with.
Good call out on API mesh and the strategy of out of process extensibility, where you're pulling things out of the core so that you're able to move more nimbly, right? When a piece of the application needs to get updated, then all you have to worry about is updating that one piece rather than the entire thing. So speaking of which, GraphQL based approaches to commerce and content integration. You mentioned a little bit about API mesh. How should developers look at implementing those types of technologies that provide the ability to bring things out of the core?
I think probably lessons learned are we want to be able to take a lot of these customizations and pull them out so that we can, when it comes to upgrades, be a lot more agile and be a lot quicker in getting those published and pushed out. And that comes through understanding that we don't have to create these really slow custom REST APIs to serve this content to the front end or build view models or all this extra stuff, right? So we can leverage something like an API mesh to be able to take data from these different systems and to consolidate that into a more uniform structure or schema that we're trying to work with from the front end. It also creates a lot more of a collaborative development experience too, where you're having the front ends and the back end engineers talking to each other and understanding what does the schema actually need to look like so that at the end of the day, we're building the best user experience and also thinking about performance and understanding where is this data coming from? How is it getting to this point? Can we reduce some of that effort through other tools like API meshes or building out custom microservices to support that as well?
The other problem is that some of those things is just also not so long lived, but you just move the choke point from one to the other. And so what we have recommended developers thinking of these integration points that you have to do, think of those as workers or as code that runs on the edge. Lots of conversations that we're having today with clients and they're telling us, okay, here's our architecture. You need to integrate into all these systems. And all these requests needs to go through your CMS to our backend systems. And we're like, not happening. We're not an integration layer. You really need to think of these services as independent. The thinking and the ideas behind it, that you have this kind of separation of services. And so therefore, if one fails, the rest fails to the point that it's not useful and you have revenue impact, basically, right?
What that also enables your marketing teams to do is to be able to pivot on tools when they find a better tool that fits their needs. So if they're leveraging a review system, but they find something better that allows them to have more capabilities, it allows them to automate some of their review process, that transformation to a new system or that transitioning within a new system. If you've got those API meshes set up, you've got the schema already defined from a front end perspective, all you have to do is remap a couple endpoints within that configuration file and the data should come over the same to the front end. Now, if there's new content that we want to pull over, it might be some minor changes. But when we're talking about being able to quickly transition from one system to another system, it's only allowing us for more opportunities to do that.
Great insight in terms of enabling flexibility, right? Enabling you to move off of one service onto another service to make sure that you're getting the best experience that you can for your customers. Okay, so what Edge Delivery Service delivers is a simplicity in terms of the development process, the authoring process. There's a lot in terms of what it offers. In the last session, we talked about web performance, really simplifying what it is that you're creating. When you think about commerce, it is a combination of a number of services that come together. So how do you think about bringing in services and still keeping the web performance at 100% or your core web vitals being all greens? Is it a challenge, or is the simplification that we've been delivering with this integration, does it make it easier to do that?
I think what was introduced as a part of the Edge Delivery Services development lifecycle is performance testing at the PR level. So anytime I submit code as a developer, I can instantly check to see, does this code have any negative impact to the
Yeah.
overall performance of this page that I'm creating for my clients today? So you're not taking this as a, let's build an entire site and at the end of it, we'll test it and see the performance. And then, oh no, wow, like we've got so much work to do. Look at all these issues that we're facing. Throughout the entire life cycle of that project, we're always looking at saying, is this decision that I made to build this feature this way going to negatively impact the performance of that site? And if so, is that a risk we're willing to take? Because every time you make a little bit of a concession, it just compounds until you get to the point where all of a sudden you're back at a 35. So how can we make sure that we mitigate that as much as we possibly can? And I think that's every time I make a change, I submit code to be reviewed, I can see what that performance looks like.
So for customers that you've worked with, have they appreciated this kind of new shift in mindset in terms of how the development workflow happens?
I think they're excited about the results from it. Yes. I don't know how much they see at the actual like code submission level per se, but the end results that they're seeing of, hey, we took our website that used to be a Lighthouse score of a 30 is now consistently a 95 plus. I think the end results speak for itself. Just being able to see that focuses every step of the process, which also flows into as an architecting solutions. I'm now thinking about it because I want to proactively try and avoid that negative score when I submit my code. I think it's a refreshing mindset to be able to take that more from the early setup development and see that through flight cycle.
You look at performance as a budget. So depending on what kind of metrics you're looking at, you got a certain budget. For example, a key one for developers is TBT, total blocking time. It's like how long the main thread of the browser is blocked with any JavaScript activity mainly until it can actually render pages. And the hardest hit on TBT is Martin. The hardest thing that's left after using Edge Delivery Services. You do not use Edge Delivery Services. You might have all kinds of other issues with TBT. But let's assume Edge Delivery Services is the baseline. We're way under 80 milliseconds TBT just out of the box, right? Now, customers obviously want to bring in either through requirements that they have for consent management or for search engine marketing or conversion tracking or you name it, right? There's all these things and you can't get rid of them. They're important as part of the whole mix of operating a site at peak effectiveness. But that mindset is missing. So as a developer, if you get really good at this, you're going to be successful in the future. Not just looking at MarTech as this one thing, toss it into my Google Tag Manager and I'm done. But really thinking about each and every MarTech that you're adding, really deciding, is this required at the very beginning of the page? Trust me, there's very little that is required at the very beginning of the page. Because you're trading off the website being displayed versus you loading the thing that you feel like is important. And trust me, the most important thing is showing the website. And then once the website is visible, which is LZP, after LZP, let's start to lazy load things that are required right after that. And then there's other stuff, which really, it doesn't matter if you load it like 3 seconds later. That is a different mindset that we have to start thinking of. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of folks still do today. There's also missing awareness that this is actually how you measure this problem. The problem is measured in milliseconds of TBT. And then if we agree on that's the yardstick, that's how we measure, let's figure out how we can budget that TBT in a way that helps you to maintain the different milestones as a site or a page is rendered in the consumer's browser. I know it's hard because there's all these things that you don't control. They're not your code, but that is the path to a sustainable performance on the site. And the opposite is, I'm loading the Google Tag Manager at the very top of the page, the way Google describes that in their documentation. And I just added all the MarTech that marketing wanted to. Where's the problem? Well, that is the problem. You shouldn't do that. Right. So it's a learning curve, I guess, that we all have to go through in managing, maintaining that to really have consistently fast pages.
Something that we're also noticing ourselves is, as you mentioned, Google recommends putting your GTM container at the very top of the page. Let that be the first thing that loads. And understanding that not everything in there is mission critical to be loaded. There might be a couple things. So I think what we've noticed, especially since investing into edge delivery services more lately, is MarTech, at least from a developer's perspective, it's a black box. It's the system that the marketing team owns. They add their tags to it. I put the little snippet in the head and I just let them put what they need to. But there's a lot of impacts to the site performance when we send it up the way that Google recommends. So there's a lot of other creative solutions to understand, okay, sure, there are a couple tags that may require to be put in a little bit closer to the head or to the initial load, whether it's CDP integration or content personalization. That stuff might need to go a little bit higher in the load process. So understanding that just because we're talking MarTech doesn't necessarily mean everything has to live in a GTM container at the head, but it also doesn't mean everything has to live delayed or deferred or pushed to later. It's taking a new approach at MarTech and not just saying the black box, we just put it there. We hope it works. We hope it doesn't negatively impact our performance, but understand there's a more strategic route.
I guess the last thing I wanted to ask is in terms of commerce CMS integrations that go really well and where the end result is a magnitude faster than it was before, what have we seen working with customers? What value have they gotten out of being able to have a fast commerce site? Is that critically important?
You mentioned it earlier. We're not negotiating on green cover riders. We have seen with customers that have achieved that significant benefits, not just on-site benefits, which means that visitors are just spending more time on the site. But I think it's undeniable that mostly for Google specifically, that this has a good impact on ranking. Now, people are like, why? Well, I mean, it's publicly documented that green color vitals will give you a boost. And it's very important to understand what that boost means. You will not see this boost in branded keywords, which means where your brand name was mentioned, because most likely you're already on the top for that. Where you see the impact is unbranded keywords. So I think that's one thing almost non-negotiable when it comes to that. I think the other part when it comes to simplicity is the ability to deploy and be super fast in doing that. A change to code should be as simple as a change to content. You fix the typo and hit publish and you're done. You fix the thing and you hit CR, commit, done. Right? It should be the same way.
Yeah, that's a great call out. Tyler, any last comments?
Yeah, I think to touch on that same idea as well, it's not only just fast deployments, but also reducing the overall complexity of development to be able to allow us to iterate a lot faster, right? We're going back to the basics of web development, vanilla JavaScript, plain CSS, allowing us to be able to be a lot more fast to deploy, to be able to quickly iterate on that code and that idea and that requirement that came from a business and say, cool, I've got something, I've got it here. I wrote a couple lines of JavaScript. That's all I need to do. I don't have to compile it. I don't have to do anything else. And we can deploy that instantly to the CDN layer and see those instant results. One other thing I wanted to touch on too is you focused a lot on the SEO value behind this and the site performances and how these fast lighthouse scores are benefiting organic SEO rankings. Just to put some potential numbers out there, we're really excited about what we've seen in that space as well, because for a couple of our clients specifically, we're seeing in some very saturated markets, very generic keywords. They weren't even in the top 100 search results for certain keywords that are now, because of having the lighthouse score in the 95 plus range, they're seeing their name popping up in the top 5 results now. And some of those very generic type of search keywords. Yes, it's going to increase impressions and increase organic traffic and conversion rates. But what that allows the business now to do is potentially reduce some of their paid spending in some of this MarTech and funnel some of that budget and those finances to continue further growth and other opportunities to continue expanding their business in other markets or wherever the case might be. So we're really excited about some of the results that we're seeing in their spaces as well.
That is absolutely outstanding, Tyler. I appreciate that fantastic insight on what you're seeing out there. And that wraps up another episode of Web Currents. Thank you to both Cedric and Tyler for sharing your expertise with us. We hope you found these insights valuable. Remember, consider developing self-service systems that reduce the need for development support and enable faster iterations. Also, consider technologies like API Mesh, GraphQL, and microservices for performance, easier upgrades, and more flexibility. Finally, remember your total blocking time budget when implementing MarTech integrations, and don't forget, incorporate performance testing early to ensure green core web vitals that drive organic growth. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Check out these related videos for more tips and tricks on web development, and follow us on social media for the latest updates. Thanks for watching, and happy coding.